Hi and welcome back to the channel. Hope you've all been well. This is actually my third attempt at recording this video, as it slowly morphed from a 3-way showdown to a 6-way showdown and now a 7-way showdown featuring the brand new Vin3 Nova. Seeing as I have the Vin pretty early, I thought it would be good to have a look at it and just see how good it is. Spoiler alert, it's pretty good. Normally I kind of just yap forever, so this time I'm going to try to keep the intro short and save the yap for a little bit later. We're going to breeze through now rapid fire style, because otherwise my brain rotted zero attention span brain is going to die in editing. Here's some stats on the Vin3 Nova. I did get it from Taobao at about half price, but I'll still be evaluating it based on the Western price tag. Currently only the top Nova version is available, but it may be worth holding out for the tier down. Here's the other 6 cubes and some quick stats. You can pause here to have a read. We've got DaYan Zhanchi V5, Qiyi's Tornado V4 Pioneer, Moyu's Huameng TG and Weilong V11, and finally GAN16 Maglev and v100. Sorry I lied, it's actually yap time right now, so I can address the elephant in the room. Pricing. These cubes are expensive. However, the v100 and v11 are by all measures except for price, mid-ranges. Moyu and GAN can gaslight you into thinking that $85 is a normal flagship price, but when DaYan and Qiyi can cram all the adjustments you could ever want into a cube half that price, you gotta realize that $85 is just not acceptable. Dear Moyu and GAN, please, if you're going to make $85 cubes, don't just take your $40 ones and add magnets and add some sort of extra adjustment. I guess this is more of a cry to everyone watching this video. Spoiler alert, don't buy the GAN16 or the Super Weilong V2 or whatever the heck the Super Weilong was supposed to be without trying them first. Okay, back to rapid fire mode. The Vin3 has a chunky box which feels functional if still a bit cheap. It comes with a nice velvet bag and a couple of adjustment tools. More on this later, but the 3D printer tool is almost certainly an afterthought, as it doubles up on one side of the so-called rocket ship tool. Here's all the accessories that come with the cubes. All of them have a box, while these 3 have pouches too. I will say that the Zhanchi has the nicest accessories. The box is super solid and the bag is just so plush and so nice. All of these have click-based dual adjustment systems. The Tornado's is still the easiest to use with its handle, clear numbers, and good range. The TG is also hand adjustable, but it's a bit hard to read and the upper end of its settings are way too tight. The GAN DAS is pretty clear and simple, but the v100 may not go as slow or as stable as some may like. The same is true, but to a lesser extent for the GAN16. The v11 is also easy to use but a bit tricky to read, and it does cover a good range, which is nice to see. The Zhanchi system is theoretically great, but in practice extremely annoying. The inner dial is fine enough, however the outer compression dial needs to line up with the number 5 on the inner one, which is just frankly ridiculous as it's so difficult to read the thin numbers. I've also had mine adjust itself, which is a known issue from other people that I've heard reports from. I was just solving on it one day, noticed it felt off, so I opened it up and 3 of the 6 sides had tightened themselves. The compression also doesn't seem very effective, with very little difference between the settings. The Vin system is both amazing and horrendous. The range on both adjustments is second to none and very functional, but there are no numbers whatsoever. This means that you have to count from the bottom click and memorize what setting you're on, like you're doing 7 simul clock memorization or something like that. I spent so much time trying to set this up and I never want to touch that DAS again. That being said, the stock settings of 4 and 4 are very balanced and should work for most people. Remember how I mentioned that the tool was a bit of an afterthought? That's because the red rocket ship tool does not grip onto the adjustment system very well, which means that it slides off and guess what? You don't remember what setting you're on. Magnet adjustment on the Tornado V4 is very simple, as you only need 8 adjustments to do all the piece magnets. You just take a flathead screwdriver or something like that, put it in the slot and turn. The Huameng TG adds corner core magnet adjustment, with an excellent wheel system over here in the corners. You just spin the wheel and it pulls the magnet up and down on a post. However, the piece magnet adjustment is atrocious, as you need to poke the tool into 24 slots and feel like you're snapping something inside every single one. There's also almost no indication of what setting you're on other than the distance between the notches, and I don't know about you, but I have no clue what setting I'm on right now. Conversely, the Zhanchi V5 over here has excellent piece magnet adjustment, with only 12 adjustments needed for the whole cube, because when you turn this side, the other side also turns. However, it manages to match the TG for atrocious design with the core magnet adjustment. Camera, please, thank you. You have to disassemble the cube, then feel like you're snapping something with every click when you use the tool to turn this little thing up and down. The only upside of this system is that we get to appreciate the purple internals every time you do that. Very nice, but not actually that nice in reality. Anyway, the GAN16 has a similarly annoying but less nerve-wracking experience in terms of changing these magnet rods. Again, you just twist it, pull it out, and swap it for another one. The Vin is similar to the Zhanchi, but with only 2 piece magnet settings and no core magnet adjustment. It also claims to have some sort of centrifugal weight adjustment, but I'd be lying if I said I could tell the difference in weight distribution. The difference between the magnet strength is noticeable though. The V100's magnet rods are non-removable, and they feel similar in strength to the GAN16's white rods. My Weilong V11 is a modded standard version with 4x1mm N42 magnets on the core, and a very strong 3x5mm N50 setup on the corners. I used Pedro's 3D printed Weilong V10 kit, and it worked fine here because the dimensions are pretty much the same on the inside. I would recommend using the magnet extensions rather than stacking magnets for the corners like I did though. That kit will be linked in the description as always. For the stock V11, it has pretty weak magnets all around. The piece magnets are pretty weak and the core magnets are pretty weak. I should also add that this video does not cover all the flagships, so if you'd like to read about those, have a look at our WCA hardware guide in the description below. Pow! Ow, my ears. Pow! Bet you didn't expect that. We've got graphics now. I'll probably make another video on this where I go into more detail, but this Zhanchi is a very unique feeling cube. It feels quite big because of the square edges, and it's quite weighty. Despite the weight being distributed closer to the core, it still has a lot of momentum and requires a light turning style. The plastic isn't quite as soft as the Worm 21, but it's still soft and has a very interesting feel. While the Worm 21 and Tornado V4 have soft plastic that glides, the Zhanchi is extremely fast but still feels a bit resistant through the turn, almost like a scratchy sensation. It can also feel a bit hollow and clunky at times, which for a $40 cube is a bit disappointing. It's a moderately blocky cube with a bit of snap to it, like a more rigid but lighter turning Tornado V4. The adjustable center magnets actually do change the turning weight and speed of the cube significantly. When I'm turning well, I get really good times on this. My PB single is actually with this cube, although it did have a last layer skip, but anyway. It's the first cube that I found that I can cube for long periods of time with and not notice a significant drop in performance. Part of it, I think, is the very low pitched sound, which is really quite impressive that DaYan manages to do this consistently. It's forgiving enough to take some sloppy turning, but it can still lock up and therefore remind me that I should just turn better. The weight and momentum may be off-putting to some, so it's not the safest choice. The Tornado V4 I've already talked about in a previous video, so I'll just keep it short here. It's dense and soft feeling, and moderately blocky. I still recommend the flagship version over the Pioneer that I have here, just because the blockiness is amplified by those extra magnets, and I don't think it's worth $15 extra. The speed is reasonable but not super fast, and you may need to run looser settings to compensate. It's fairly forgiving, if a little bit unstable sometimes, so it can lock up, Overall, I don't think there's that much wrong with this cube other than subjectively that dense feel, so I think it's a pretty safe choice. It's just a little bit boring to use and some people may not like that feel. I've also covered the TG before, but I think it's worth mentioning again because I've gotten rid of that weird gummy feeling now by giving it a deep clean. I can run higher compression because it's much faster, and I quite enjoy the crunchy, bubbly feel that this cube has. It really is like a heavier, more flexible and more forgiving GAN12, hence that sticker that I put on it. The pieces are quite heavy, so it has a lot of momentum even with high magnet settings. Of course, it still has high static friction, which means it can feel sticky at low turning speeds. It's an extremely fluid cube for two reasons really. One, the magnets are not tactile at all, and two, it has, in my opinion, the best corner cutting of any modern cube. It cuts in both directions with ease and impressive range. The downside of this is that it can feel a bit squishy at times and it's a fairly flexible cube. I've never quite been able to main this for that reason. The high momentum and flex combined with the strong core magnets required to add stability mean I just struggle to adjust fully to it. You might be able to see that a bit in the solves that you've just watched. On to the V11 now. I said this in the previous video and I still stand by this. The V11 is too snappy and the reverse corner cutting is bad. I tried the stock 20 magnet Ballcore version at a comp, and the combination of light piece magnets and fast speed means that it can be pretty hard to use. It's unstable and catchy, and I found myself constantly running into the bad reverse corner cutting. Of course, if you don't mind a snappy cube, this could actually work for you. What I'm trying to say here is that the cube is flawed. However, it does have redeeming qualities. The plastic is very smooth and plush with a hint of crunchiness. It's a satisfying cube to turn, almost like a crunchier and snappier Worm 21 with a bit less glide. The pieces are also fairly evenly weighted and not very heavy, which aids with control. With my custom magnet setup, it's very controllable and much more stable than the stock versions. The reverse corner cutting issues are mitigated by the stronger auto alignment and the better stability, so I rarely lock up. I get really good times with this cube, even if some days I get sick of how snappy it is and how draggy the plastic is. I also tend to not be able to solve on it for long periods of time just for this reason. It also doesn't seem super responsive to fast lubes, but the inherent speed of the cube is quite high, so it's fairly controllable yet fast with my current setup. Overall, I think that the V10 Ballcore models are actually better cubes in stock form than this V11, as they're more balanced magnetically and therefore don't suffer from the same instability. The V100 is a different beast altogether. Turning them back to back makes the V11 feel like a pile of mush because the V100 is just so crispy and crunchy. It does this while being even more fluid and effortless to turn. The V100 is to the 16 Max what the XT3 is to the TV4 Pioneer. The caveat is that you have to be turning accurately and lightly to make use of this fluidity, much like when using the XT3. It feels very centrally weighted, yet there's a lot of momentum and extreme speed. I think this is a result of the extremely low friction, weak piece magnets and moderately strong core magnets, a la XT3. It tends to eat lube up, so it's always very fast. If you can handle the speed, I think this is one of the best cubes on the market right now. If you don't do well with very fast cubes, then you'll likely have a bad time as it will catch and lock up. I just think that the light turning and ease with which it does small corner cuts makes it a fantastic practice cube, if nothing else. It's very non-fatiguing and is nowhere near as punishing as older GAN cubes. I use this as my warm-up cube for my comp because I can turn extremely fast on it. As a side note, I actually ended up using the Tianma as my comp main, not the V11, because I found the V11 was too inherently unstable. The only potential downside of the V100 is that some people may find the crunchy plastic to feel a little bit cheap. This brings us to the GAN16 and back to the point I mentioned at the beginning of the video. It has a near identical mechanism to the V100, so it's still fluid and light to turn. However, again, I don't think this is worth the extra $45 over that cube. It's more differentiated from the V100 than the Super Weilong V2 is from the V11, but you're paying twice the price on an already expensive cube for more magnets. The plastic is smoother and glidier with less crunch, and the cube is more stable with less flex. It's also clickier as the magnets are placed in the corners of the pieces, so combined with the center magnets and physically larger size, it ends up feeling blockier. M slices are worse than the V100 because of that magnet placement too. I really do like this cube and I will continue to use it, I just don't think it's the best use of money. I would only buy it if you've tried it and know for sure that you like it more than the V100. And finally, here's the Vin3 Nova. If you've watched my older videos, I often talked about my Goldilocks cube, and here it is again in another form. This cube is similar to the Worm21 Ballcore and the Worm V9 in feel and mechanism, which is a great thing because those cubes are now discontinued. It combines the balance stability and the flexibility of the Worm V9 mechanism with soft, almost DaYan-like plastic to make a highly performant cube that feels great. The piece magnet strength is relatively strong, and on the higher setting it's even stronger than the V9's magnets. On my settings it feels extremely similar to the V9 as it's less blocky than the Worm21, and the plastic is a little bit harder. The only negative it inherits from the V9 is corner twisting. However, I don't think that this is too much of an issue and it only pops up when I'm turning really badly. The pieces are fairly light while the core carries most of the weight, much like the Zhanchi V5. The Vin feels lighter to turn than that cube, while the mechanism is also inherently more stable, which makes it more controllable and therefore easier to push TPS with. The soft plastic and light floaty turn feel makes it feel reminiscent of another DaYan cube, which is the Tengen V1. It's not quite as light to turn as that cube or as the GAN V100 Maglev, but I still enjoy turning this cube much more than I do the V11 and even the XT3 just because it's a little bit more fluid. It's not all sunshine and rainbows though. Again, like the Zhanchi V5, it doesn't quite feel like its $40 price tag in some ways. The UV coating on mine has some minor imperfections, and although it makes no difference, the caps also don't quite fit the corner pieces in some places. The more concerning issue is that there are some slight stress marks on the corners around where they put the magnet capsules in. Mine was also a little bit squeaky and scratchy during break-in, and it has 2 clicky magnets, but luckily none of these things have amounted to anything serious yet. To end on a more positive note, the Vin3 has possibly the best magnet calibration I've felt yet. The core magnets are strong but linear feeling, while the piece magnets can be strong but are still unobtrusive. On the weaker setting, they provide the perfect balance of stability and fluidity for my preferences. Because of this, I think that this cube represents a great balanced proposition. It fills the gaping hole left by Moyu's discontinuation of the Worm21, Worm V9 and the Super Weilong V1, while adding its own unique feel. There's also a fair chance that the issues that I have with mine will be solved in later batches, since I do actually have example number 224. Here's the cubes on a subjective scale of blocky to flexible, with a few other cubes for reference. I'll put the sound test in the part 2 of this video just because this current one's getting a bit long. Make sure to stay tuned for part 2 of this video where I go through again the sound test and the mechanisms and a few other thoughts that I have that didn't make it into this video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already and the notification bell too so you can be notified when part 2 drops. You can probably tell by now which cube I like best, and that's the GAN V100 Maglev. I get the best times on the V11, but the V100 is just so much more fun to solve on. The V100 gets the top spot, while I put the Vin3 just ahead of the Worm21. The GAN16 slots right behind the XT3, but really this S tier can be rearranged on any given day depending on how I'm feeling. The A tier has also been rearranged a bit thanks to some new setups, and while they're close, I think that this is more defined in terms of position within the tier. The Tianma, V9 and Zhanchi V5 are equal top of A tier, followed by the TV3 Pioneer and the MGC Beta, and then the TG and modded RS3M 2020. The Tornado V2 Ballcore and stock RS3M 2020 round out the bottom of A tier as before. So, with the GAN16 out, which cube should you buy? I think that the GAN V100 Maglev is the best choice here, provided you like very fast cubes or can get used to them. It's just so fluid and effortless to turn without any major flaws. There's also a GAN V100 Leap, which might already be released in a non-limited edition version by the time this video goes live, which won't have the UV coating but does swap the maglev for springs. This would then be my recommendation if you want a more controllable cube. The Vin3 is an equally excellent choice if you want a softer feeling, more stable and more forgiving cube. However, the build quality and fluidity of the V100 is unmatched. Personally, I wouldn't buy the V11, but if you must, I'd pick the 8 magnet spring version. If you value adjustability, the other three here are equally valid options depending on your preferences. I'd steer people towards either the TV4 flagship, so not the Pioneer, or the Spring TG though, and I suspect more people will like this TG because of its speed and GAN12-like feel. I'd also consider the Weilong V10, as I previously mentioned, and even the V9 can be a good option if you like more flexible and tactile cubes. Plot twist, there's actually a second elephant in the room here. Getting a bit cramped here, huh? That would be the mid-ranges that I've already made a video about. For $11 less than the V100, there's the XT3V1 Pioneer. It trades the click-based adjustment system for a screw and ratchet cup, but it offers much of the same experience. It's fast, it's crunchy, and it's fluid, if a little bit less so than the V100. It's also a little more blocky, but it's also more forgiving and more easily slowed with lubes. The V11 has the MGC Beta and the MGC Meta as alternatives. The Beta Maglev is much cheaper at $25 and feels fairly similar if a little bit blockier than my modded V11. The top spec Meta is $35 and offers a more flexible feeling with strong tactile magnets. Both are more blocky but far less snappy than the stock V11, and I think this is a really good thing. They don't turn quite as lightly either, but the hand feel and plastic feel are similar, with in my opinion genuine advantages over the V11. The main caveat is that you have to deal with YJ's terrible quality control, which may be a deal breaker for some. I'll just put a picture up on the screen now, and I'll probably voice over that later. These cubes can also be alternatives to the Tornado V4 if you don't mind the lack of magnet adjustment. The Vin3, TG and Zhanchi V5 are pretty unique and don't have alternatives really, so if either of those appeal to you, then you're stuck paying $40. Anyway, on that bombshell, I think it's time to end. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.